So I'm very, very proud to have here four terrific panelists. Before I introduce them, I do just want to say one thing. We were expecting to have Julie Ginches from Purpose Worldwide to join us, and we were having a very enthusiastic discussion with her just a few days ago. But on 2 nights ago, she was taken to hospital with a heart scare, and I'm very happy to say that she has been discharged and sent home, and she's not in any immediate danger, but it's still a tough moment, and obviously not something that you should travel on if you just have it in that situation. So let's all send Julie a kind of mental big well-wish, get better soon. But that's why she's not here. She didn't decide not to come or have too many drinks with the English contingent on Saturday night, as Richard didn't do, but saw happening perhaps. Anyway, people who are with us, let's start from over there. Stephanie, I'm going to ask each of you to just introduce yourself a little bit. I asked Stephanie Crockett to join us because I thought it'd be very helpful to have someone who has a responsibility for both PR and advertising within her group. Stephanie, just say a little bit about your agency.
Thanks so much, Julian. Stephanie Crockett, I'm with Mower Agency. We are, as Julian said, an integrated agency, marketing, advertising, public relations. We've been around since 1968, so just celebrated our 55th year. And we are independent and actually 100% employee-owned ESOP. And as an integrated agency, we're actually about probably 50-50 B2B, B2C. And so I'm looking forward to talking about the approach of measurement relative to an integrated approach and how that impacts how we measure and bring measurement forth to our PR clients.
Steve Behm from Real Chemistry. Tell us.
Nice to meet everybody. I'm Steve Behm. I oversee our crisis and reputation practice for Real Chemistry, which focuses on the healthcare experiences that people want to have and communicating about them. And for me, measurement is critical because I want to know what our program is supposed to do. And so that I love the fact that this is the first panel that we get to talk about it to really set the tone for the rest of the sessions.
And next in line, my new colleague since June, Helen Anderson. Helen joined the Network1 as our managing director. But before that, she also spent many years on a client side. Helen, tell us a little bit about your background from that perspective too.
Thank you, Julian. Yes, so the new managing director of the Network1. Any good PR professional will know you need a plan B, and I am plan B today, so I'm sorry to be sitting in Julie's seat, and we wish her well. So my background is 3 decades of being a CMO client side. So running organisations, looking at clients internationally and their international business. So that's my perspective today.
And thank you very much, Helen. And last but not least, I think it's always a bit unfair, if you have a game and you don't invite the referee. So I thought we should have someone. And Richard, we've seen each other in conferences and never sat on a panel together before. Richard, tell us a little bit about what you do with CARMA.
Thank you, Julian. Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Bagnall. I'm wearing 2 hats. I'm the CEO of CARMA in Europe and in America. We're a global media intelligence and comms evaluation business. I'm a poacher turned gamekeeper. I used to work in PR till about 30 years ago when I moved into measurement. I had my own measurement company. Over those 30 years, I've been one of the, main drivers behind the Professional Trade Association, AMEC, and for the last 6 years, I was its chairman. While at AMEC, I've led on and pushed the development of a number of global best practice educational initiatives to help PR professionals to measure in a more meaningful way. Some of the tools you might know, things like the AMEC Integrated Evaluation Framework, the Planning Guide, the Measurement Maturity Mapper, those type of things. And I'll bring that perspective to today as well.
Thank you. Let's start with asking, particularly our agency guests. I've talked a little bit about things getting tough from a macro perspective. Do you find things getting tougher? And this is a preface to kind of and why and how we deal with it, so leading us on to our subject. Do you think that where we are today and the future looking forward is going to be harder for agencies than it has been for the last 5-10 years?
Yes. I think probably so. I think it has been certainly very challenging, certainly in the world of independent agencies in particular, when you're looking at all of the consolidation that's happening, it just continues to put a squeeze on us and gives us an opportunity to really try and fight with the big guys. But when it comes to the client perspective, I think there's such talk and fear about generative AI and what that has for our business. I'm not concerned with it, but I think that there are bigger concerns that will impact us and impact our clients. And I think if you look at, I was thinking to myself as Julian sort of introduced himself as an optimist and then went on for slides about all of the horrible things happening in the world. I thought, actually, you're setting us up really well, because if you think about, I can't remember the study now off the top of my head, but a recent study by PwC was that 1 in 5 CEOs are experiencing a crisis on a yearly basis, and they're expecting to see that moving forward. So I think that our jobs are going to get more difficult because we have to be prepared for that. But I think that's the important aspect of recognizing that crisis is going to come in some form, whether it's at a macro level like war, pandemic, or it's something closer to home for our clients. And as communications professionals, we have to communicate the importance of crisis planning, and public relations as almost a way that you're sort of preparing yourself for that inevitable crisis to come. And I don't think that that's something that clients are really on board with at this point, because budgets are tight. And so for us to recognize and communicate to them the importance of the pre-plan is really critical.
Steve, same question to you. Do you see agencies having a tougher time to prove the value and stick with the budget, and it's not just, can we take it down 10% or raise it 10%? It's kind of like, you guys really worth it anymore? Do you see that?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's actually never been a more exciting time to be on the agency side. And I say that because our buyer set has changed dramatically. Part of the poly-crisis or the perma-crisis environment that we're all living in, suddenly now the board is hiring us. CEOs are hiring us. The CHRO is hiring us. Product and marketing sometimes is hiring PR. So the buyer set is changing. So when we start talking about showing the value of our work, there's not the simple report card that everybody gets measured and their programs get measured the same way. It's the intent of the program that we need to focus on to making sure that the measurement and ROI is set against that. And so for me and for our firm, that's a really exciting place to be, because it's really expanding the aperture of what PR can actually achieve.
Rich, I want to jump to you, go back to you and say, Helen, but, so you're kind of like the referee in this, in a sense. You are the measurer. Do you find, you could find one or two things. You could find that, you're another cost and therefore come under pressure from clients. Or you could find that a client really needs to justify things and agencies need to prove things. And actually, it could be a golden era for the measurement industry.
There's never been more interest in measurement than there is now. I mean, as I said, I've been working in the space for over 30 years. Many agencies are launching their own in-house approaches to measurement. Our industry is growing significantly. There's been a huge amount of private equity has come into the media intelligence, particularly space. I think that comes with a word of caution to everybody. Private equity firms like to have companies that build a tool. You build it once, you incur one set of costs, and then you sell it many times. That's why many of the media intelligence businesses, many of the companies that count things in social media, digital media, are so valuable and create so much cash. That can actually work against the interests of PR and comms professionals. You need to measure your value in terms of what it is that you have done. And very frequently, what you have done is not just your activity, it has to be your value. So my word of warning to everybody here is, don't just think that a tool that is counting activity is measuring value. We have to measure value right now. We've talked about CFOs. The Deloitte European CFO monitor shows uncertainties at the highest level that's ever been. They can only do two things, CFOs. They can spend more to try and drive more sales and generate more cash, or they can pull back on the brake, spend less, and they'll spend less on anything that is activity without value. So I think I'd really like to ram that point home.
Last, but of course we always put them last, the client perspective in a way. Helen is more than that. But Helen, as some of you may know, Helen's a member of the Chartered Institute of PR and the Chartered Institute of Marketing. And a lot of her work was with chartered or corporate bodies, most recently Chartered Institute of Securities Investments, before then others, including the US Chamber of Commerce, if I remember correctly, in the UK. The client perspective, you can put yourself back in your client's shoes for a moment. And are you looking at more metrics, different metrics? What would you be looking at if you were still where you were 6 months ago?
Yeah, I mean, that's half the problem, is we don't put ourselves in our clients' shoes enough. And you've got to remember, in order to commission an external agency or to bring an external body on board, an internal communications professional, or whether comms might not even be in your remit, you're having to justify the spend internally to people that do not understand this sector. So you're having to constantly show, particularly in the environments I came from, CFOs who are like, show me the numbers. So measurement becomes absolutely crucial in the commissioning process and the results orientated. And where budgets have been squeezed, you've got to remember, certainly in London and UK and in Europe, with recessions and then wars, and the spend bucket, if you like, has decreased so rapidly that every penny is scrutinised more now than ever before. So I would just encourage everyone to look at what the client need is. And as to Stephanie's point earlier, organisations used to be, if you look at a proactive and a reactive plan on a PR strategy, the proactive used to be 80% and 20%. It's not anymore, it's 50-50. They are jumping from situation to situation. They are having to take positions on wars that actually have nothing to do with their business because their clients are expecting to see that, and that all takes time and energy. So I think it's really important to put yourself in the client's shoes. I mean, that's like, you know, the absolute bottom line for everybody. But and making sure that your model and your pitch and your relationship is based on delivering those messages and those numbers and those statistics that the client would need in order to justify bringing you on, retaining you on.
You know, there's a theme kind of coming through this, which is about you need to measure, you need to justify. There is evidence of an ROI, or reason to believe in that. But there's a whole question behind this of what exactly we are measuring. And I know in our pre-discussion we had a few kind of talks about this, and you know, there's measuring deliverables. You know, did we get likes? Did we get comments? Did we get sales? Did we get that sales is an outcome. Did we get things that we are supposed to have delivered? You know, and I'm sure we all passed the days of, you know, did we get AEVs and things like that? But are we looking enough at what it is we are measuring in terms of ROI, and where should we, as an industry, be changing our focus to? For anybody, any four of you to jump in on that one.
I'm happy to take a stab
Please.
at it. So I would say, I think the most important thing to start with, of course, is understanding the business objectives. We can measure clicks, impressions, likes, engagements all day long, but if it doesn't move that business needle, then who cares, right? Then that's where you're not going to see the value. So I think to what Richard was saying earlier, it's just recognizing that value, but that value from the agency's perspective may not be the same as from the internal perspective. And a CMO internally has multiple stakeholders. A CEO has a different set of measurables that a CFO has, that somebody else on the team may have, procurement, whomever. And so I think that's the important piece, is starting with understanding what are those key business objectives. Is it market share increase? Is it X number of widgets sold? Is it whatever that business objective is? And starting from there. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have as agency partners too, is very often we aren't able to get that kind of information, right? Like, we can tell here's what we did. Now let's connect that to what your sales team did, or how we pulled that through, and how we pulled that all the way through to those business objectives. And that's one of the big challenges, I think, for us as agency partners, is very often they don't have the ability to measure themselves. They don't have the ability to determine attribution, you know, in the simplest form, and that's certainly on the advertising side all the way to the PR side. And that's where proving that value, I think, is really the most challenging, is when you don't have that capability internally on the client side to be able to bring all of those connection points together.
Steve, is it something, I mean, you find, do you need to push back to clients when they're saying, how do you prove this is worth my while to spend? Well, what is it you're trying to achieve?
So I think clarity is critical. So I don't know if you want to call that a pushback, but just making sure that what we're measuring is actually going to have impact. And long ago is the day where measuring impressions and media clips and a headline and so forth is the end of the day, the end of the road. We've been hired by clients. We had a CEO who was new on the job, and our measuring stick was that he walked down the hall, people called him by his first name. That was our measuring stick. So we had someone follow him around and tally first name versus last name. That was, for him, that was important. He wanted to be seen as a leader of people and not just the company. We had another client that hired us to engage around keeping their entire workforce retained after a terrible explosion that occurred. It was critical to their business because they couldn't recruit people fast enough if they lost their employee base. So for 5 months, we did an internal comms campaign to keep everybody engaged, finding them work to do, to keep them part of the company, so that as soon as that plant was back up and operational again, they had a full workforce. Like, that is not a classic PR ask. But we were the ones that were able to connect, again, between talent and people and the audience in that community to keep that workforce vibrant. So, again, it gets back to who is the buyer, the critical business need, and then what role can PR either drive or influence the work that needs to happen for the business.
Richard,
Well, I think it's about having tailored objectives, tailored reporting, focus on the audiences. What is it that matters to them? I mean, just want to, reiterate those points. I do think that too often we're in cricket parlance, and if you understand, being on the back foot, we're in a defensive posture, and that's because I think our industry, and I'm talking about the comms industry, doesn't lean in enough to measurement and evaluation. They wait, they receive a load of numbers, they think numbers and charts and dashboards look like measurement, so they send them through to the client, and they think, well, that's surely going to be okay, and then they get asked questions, or they get said, why didn't you get a bigger number? And they find it very difficult to answer that question, and they're on the back foot and they're defensive. What we've got to do is link this through to the objectives, have a proper plan, agree up front what success looks like, what a target looks like, push back at that point. You can have a sensible, rational, measured conversation up front, and you don't have to fear it. But once you've got numbers on a piece of paper, you are on that back foot. So, I would urge everybody to really think about measurement as part of the planning process, and get thinking about it right up front.
Helen, I just thought about, if the question is about what we're measuring, and I'm hearing Richard and also Steve about, public relations. I mean, I thought public relations was about relations with the public, that is your external relations. But actually what Steve's saying is, for a lot of clients, the more critical audience may be your internal relations. Do you see some of that emerging?
Yeah, for sure. I think that there's two themes that are coming out that I can recognise here. One of which is the relationship you have between client and the agency. So that is crucial. So that is a dialogue, a friendship, there's trust in that relationship, and that's nurtured over time. Because often the answers are already there, and it's just unpicking, looking at it in a different way, a different perspective, looking at the numbers in a different way. I used to mark on, things my teams used to put in front of me with an SWF, which was for so what factor. So what? Like, tell me the story, tell me what's next, tell me what the action is, tell me what the impact, go back to the business objectives, how have we contributed? The second theme would be around, looking at the special power that independent agencies have, and this is why we're so passionate about what we do at the Network One, is because they are so agile and so flexible. Client needs change from day to day. So coming back on that client-agency relationship, it might be the latest problem that you're helping the client with, and then go back to the plan later. It might be that it's as reactive as it is proactive. So, yeah, that would be the two things I would say.
There's one other question I want to ask about, which is, I talked at the beginning about optimism. You have to recommend things that you don't know if they will work. you've got good reason to hope, you've got good reason to suspect, you need to try and experiment. But at the end of the day, it is to do with future. And one of the things that struck me during the pandemic was right at the beginning of the pandemic, and many friends who were in comms or marketing, and I would call them up and they're sitting at home, but they're working with the team. What are you doing? And they, almost to a person, they said, forecasting. Really? Yeah. Because, marketing, or it comes to a degree, but this is probably more true of marketing in general, is looking at the different aspects of what's happening in a business in a completely unexpected and unfamiliar situation. And that's partly customer demand, but it's equally supply chain, it's equally finance, it's equally product development and design. And I would like to ask us to think about what we are measuring what's happening today. We measured what's happening yesterday. To what extent, as an industry, are we equipped to measure or predict more efficiently what's going to happen in the future? Is that should be part of our debate on ROI? Because at the end of the day, ROI is what's going to happen tomorrow.
I think it goes back to what Richard said earlier about showing your value. I mean, if you could demonstrate to your clients that you could help them predict what's going to happen, I mean, that's the greatest relationship ever, right? That's like unfireable agency relationship. I think that you're right. It's such a great point, Julian, that thinking about measuring, we spend so much time looking at what we did and how that can help us change what we need to do forward, right? And by building trust with a client, you can do more of that test learning and optimizing. But being able to measure and have a scorecard against behaviors that are going to change things moving forward, and those sort of like leading measures, I don't think we're doing that enough. We're not doing that enough with our clients, but I think that's a critical piece. Whether or not you're going to be able to forecast sales, but it's also forecast this behavior. If we do this, this will generate X, Y, Z, right? And I think that's a piece of it, which I don't think we're doing today.
So predictive analytics is the holy grail. It's the
Yep.
hot topic that everyone would like to do. I think people are flawed in their approach to it because they're trying to look for signals amongst a whole load of noise, which is based on social media. We can all see the car crash, you could call it, of X at the moment. Actually, there's more noise on X than ever before. But whether these are accurate and meaningful accounts. We're dealing with humans. Humans are, we're complex creatures. I think about car companies. We work for a number of car companies. They try to push us to become aware of a brand, of a product, the car, to choose it, to like it. And they try to push us to the car configurator because they know from at that point, once we've built that, we're likely to go into a garage and then hopefully we'll buy the car. I got pushed down that journey 10 years ago. I wanted to buy a BMW. I went to a garage to buy the BMW, and the guy at the garage was just so rude to me, I just walked out. And how can you account for that type of thing if you're trying to give attribution to a PR campaign? Because it was nothing to do with the comms. The comms had all worked. I decided I wanted this car, but an interaction at the last moment stopped me from buying it. I think we need to look at real world. We need to measure beyond social media to get towards predictive analytics. I think that's where the mistake's being made.
Interesting. We also, this being, the Entrepreneurs and Independence Forum, we do welcome a little chip in from the audience as well. And I'd just like to float a question to any of you. It's not compulsory. You won't be marked. And it's to say, most of you are probably in that time of year, beginning of November, where you're in those discussions with clients about your next year's budget. If anybody's got a question for the panel or an observation about how that's looking this year, the kind of questions that clients are asking you to justify your budget, the kind of arguments that you're putting forward and you're finding resonating. I'd absolutely love it if one or two people just pop a hand up and share with the group. There's a gentleman right at the back.
Oh, I'm not a gentleman.
Oh, sorry. There's a bright light shining in my eyes. It's hard to see.
Then I'm a scoundrel.
That's a scoundrel. Please do say who you are in case other people don't know.
My name is Curtis Sparrow. I'm from Bospar, the pro-gay, pro-woman, pro-Israel PR firm. Hi, everyone. I just was on a call today with someone who said to me that he was wanting to know what are the best ways to drive business results, which of course is why we're here. And I was wondering, well, you know, I went down the whole webinar track and a few other things that I saw, but I thought maybe now that I'm here with my betters, all the smarter people, you might have some suggestions on tactical ideas on things that you've seen drive immediate sales, because that seems to be what everyone cares about.
I would like to chip.
I'll take the bait on that one. So I would come back to, okay, so what's going to drive business? What are the business objectives? Are you positioning for an M&A? Are you looking to grow sales? Are you looking to change your market share, create a new way to talk about who you are? You used to be a food company, and now you're going to be a branded tech company. I mean, there's lots of different ways to support business strategy, and I would come back with, what are the 3 most important things you're going to do as a company next year? And then see how comms and PR can help drive the results toward that. Drive eyeballs, drive interest, drive attention, capture opportunity moments to get the eyes of analysts and investors. I think one of the things that is really important is we can tell great, beautiful stories, but if there aren't actions that are backing them up, who cares? And suddenly we're out on a plank and we're in the middle of talking amongst ourselves, but having 0 business impact. So understanding, first and foremost, what those business objectives are, then it becomes a lot easier to flesh out what an adjoining, PR or marketing campaign could be to really drive the results they're looking for.
Can I build on Steve's point?
Yeah.
I would urge everybody as well to make sure you understand your audience and do some more planning. A lot of companies that I talk to haven't researched their audience's behavior, feelings, what they're reading, listening to, being influenced by since pre-pandemic times. They're still relying on research back then. And all of our hopes, fears, actions, behaviors have changed. So if you want to drive any kind of outcome, you must understand your audience really well. And so I'd urge everyone to look at how well they know their audience, how recent that research was, and probably update it.
I just wanted to provide a quick perspective, because in the last month and a half, I've been to 2 different conferences with some of the biggest CMOs in the world. Mark Pritchard, Coca-Cola, all of the brands. And every single one of those CMOs talked primarily about influencer. And they said social media needs to be at the center. Like, that is where your marketing plan starts. And this was more consumer brands versus B2B brands, but they talked about social media and influencers being the most critical piece of their marketing plan, bar none. And so it's fascinating, and I also think that when you think about influence and you think about social media, we're not only talking about the Kardashians, God help us, but thinking about other aspects of what influencer means. In a B2B space, that could be customers, right? Those are influencers. Analysts, other ways to think about it, but that seems to be the quickest way. And that seems to be the thing that's pushing sales, direct sales, to answer your question, sir, specifically about that, because it's more credible when you're hearing it from somebody else and not from the brand. Because all of the slides that Julian started with, what people are lacking right now is faith and trust. And they certainly don't have it in big brands. And so they're looking for other influencers to be credible resources. So that's what they're looking for and putting so much of their focus on that.
Any other question from the audience or observation? Sorry, it's difficult for me to see. Thanks very much. Yes, thank you very much.
Very bright lights.
Thank you. I'm not going to respond to the specific thing.
Sorry.
Hi everyone. I'm Rich. I'm with CC Group in the UK. I'm not going to sort of respond to that immediate thing that you were just talking about, but I wanted the panel's opinion on something. About 5 years ago, we had a former ad planner in our business, and I was tootling off to a conference to sit on a panel to talk about measurement. And I said, so what's the vibe in the advertising industry around this? And he said, why the fuck would we talk about measurement? We're shit at it. Like, yeah. It's a fair point, actually. Why? I think, right, now we have the tools and the ability to measure just about anything we want to, as long as there's a budget there. Why do we as an industry continue to bang on about this? And are we doing ourselves a disservice?
I'd like to ask if any of the panel would like, not you, because you're bound to be in favor of doing more measurement, but no, seriously, yes, and I think there's two questions in there. One is about, are we up to speed with the ability to measure, for example, social influence? We spent most of our careers thinking that influence was about influencing editors and journalists.
Right.
And now we're probably refocusing. Are we good enough at that? Are we doing the right thing? Or are we just shit at it, to quote Richard?
So I'll go out on a plank and then the rest of the panel can correct me. So I think the diversity of our programs gives us a lot of different tools to use. And I think if there's a mistake sometimes in our industry is we talk about things like the conversation thread and tonality and what's trending. And we miss sort of the core and the root of what the program that we're proposing and we're executing was supposed to achieve. And so, we can talk about it's 71 degrees outside today. There are 167 chairs in this room. Who cares? We're here are you here to network? How many people? Are you going to walk out of this conference with one insight and that's going to be the impact? So understanding what is core to the program and what we're trying to influence should be the measuring stick. And I think where we get stuck sometimes is we hope that there's this one holy grail measuring stick for all programs. And we should never aspire to that. We should actually look for the diversity and the uniqueness of the programs and the ways that we measure them. And I think to your point, I think we should stop with that. We can't measure our progress. We absolutely can't. We have to show the impact that it's having and not just the result of what I would consider small-time PR, which is looking for things like tonality or just coverage in newspapers or even online, but really get to the core of the programs that we're looking to have influence on their businesses.
Helen, are agencies up with the play, behind the play, need to get closer to real measurements, different target audience, internal as well as external, social influencers and not just editors and journalists, etc.? Are we guys up with the play or are we behind?
I would say you need to put your head back in the client space. And I'll come back to that original point I made earlier. Public relations is no longer the handling of press and journalists and the public reputation of your business. It's, as Richard was saying earlier, it's the delivery on the shop floor and the client experience and the client customer journey right from point A through to point Z. And therefore, the skill set that PR leaders need is far broader now than it's ever needed to be, whether it be if anyone could tell me in a nutshell what the secret sauce is to influencer marketing, then please come and tell me, because we're all learning every day, mainly because the platforms keep changing all their algorithms, their APIs, and what works and what doesn't changes on a daily basis. So in order to be an expert and in order to be the very best source of support that you can be to your clients, you need to be open, listening, broaden your skill sets, bring your talent in-house, into your agencies to make sure that you can service all of those needs, but also make the client understand and give them the support that they need, because they will continue to need the measurements and the yardsticks that we talked about. Because until we have more CMOs and public relations professionals in CEO posts, they're going to continue to have to justify the spend to people that don't understand the sector.
Richard, I'm going to get the last word to you on this one because we're very nearly out of time.
So I'm going to just circle it back. I am an optimist, like Julian, and we all should be optimistic. We've never had more tools, more techniques, more advice, more guidance on how to measure in a meaningful way. But guys, tools, schmools, as I call them, right? Portals, schmortals. These are not the end point. The end point, the best tool you've got is up here. It's your brain. It's leaning into this, understanding the objectives. What are the tailored ways of measuring that demonstrate the value that you have achieved? And let's please think value and not activity. They're different things.
Well, thank you to everybody. I have just one thing to say at the end, which is nothing to do with the panel. It's please do continue this conversation in the coffee break, but also if any of you are here and would like to come for a drink with us at 5:30, we're going to buy the first drink for anybody who comes up to the top of the hotel in the view bar. So please do. If you have to rush off or you've got a dinner engagement that starts early, don't worry. But if you come and share a drink with us, we'd be delighted and continue the conversation. Thank you very much to Paul, to everybody, and most particularly to the panel.